Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba. It's your daily podcast from CBC. We have a lot to talk about. The podcast, 20 minutes, making sense of your news. But I host the CBC Morning Show. We have 3 hours to try to make sense of things. Sometimes it's our triumphs here at home in this place we live in and love in. And sometimes it's our challenges. And I got to admit that today on the podcast, we're about to dig into something that is hard to make sense of, especially at a time when in Winnipeg, we're still awaiting the announcement of who is going to be our next police chief. And that person is going to have to make sense of the number of police shootings that we have in our community, what goes on in these individual incidents, and also the impact on the wider community. What is the way forward? What's the safer way forward? What's in the news that has us talking about this now is something that happened on November 24th. So we still have very few details about the man who was shot by police on that day. Winnipeg police say a man was shot and killed outside a bus shelter. This was on Portage Avenue, if you've ever been down near Unicity Mall. It was in that area. They allege the man stabbed an officer in the throat before he was shot by officers. CBC did obtain a video of this. It appears to show part of the incidents. In the video, 2 officers are seen with guns drawn. They're telling the man to, quote, put it down and, quote, drop it. This is moments before they fire several times. So we're going to dig into this. And in a moment, we're going to hear from someone who says that body cameras, in her view, are part of the answer to keeping things safer. Winnipeg Police had a media conference all about what happened here. Acting Police Chief Art Stannard addressed the videos 2 separate times during the conference.
We are aware of videos online, and we caution the public that they do not show the entire incident.
So this was a long police conference. That's just a short clip. Further along in the conversation, here's more of what Stannard said.
I'm concerned that it only shows part of the interaction. That's what I'm concerned about. There was a front part of it that doesn't seem to be on video yet. We're not sure. So I'm concerned about that. And I don't want the public to react just that part of it. I want them to wait until the whole investigation is done by IU and sort that out.
Acting Police Chief Art Stannard. Now, you can hear the entire police press conference on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. So you can go there to see the whole video. Now, the case has renewed calls, as you heard in the news, for more police accountability, which includes some calls for body cameras. Several Canadian police agencies already use them, including the RCMP. Just new last week, in fact, Steinbach RCMP started wearing cameras. Of course, the Winnipeg police right now do not wear cameras. Sheila North is a longtime MMIWG advocate and former Grand Chief of Manitoba Kiwetinawi Okimakanak, and she says police should have cameras on, and she's in studio. Hi there.
Hi, Marcy.
Why should they have cams on?
Because I think it'll bring another level of accountability and tell the bigger story of what happened, some of the befores and some of the afters. We know of course, the concerns when we only have limited amount of public video. So that causes all kinds of anxiety and triggers people and re-victimizes people, and it doesn't tell the fuller story. And I think it would start to do that, but also it would give, I think, pause for officers that may not have those ethical, abilities that they need to measure their response when they're dealing with people that are in crisis. So I think it works for both, for the police's protection as well as the public's protection.
You just heard Acting Police Chief Art Stannard saying that he's concerned that the videos circulating right now only show part of the interaction and not what transpired or may have transpired before the police opened fire, or transpired. I just want to be correct here. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think that, like I say, the video is just part of the story. We don't know what happened before or what happened after. There's mention of the officer doing CPR. We don't see any evidence of that. So it's left with lots of questions and lots of triggers. Many people have heard stories and are part of this fractured relationship with police, whether it's RCMP, Winnipeg Police, or others throughout Canada. When we see police force like that, it automatically, for some, takes it back to the place where we know that unfair practices were practiced and people lost their lives or people got injured. So it's not conducive to good building relationships when we don't have the bigger picture, I don't think.
I want to just look at this, the cameras specifically, through the lens of some reporting we've done. So, we've been talking for many years about the idea of cameras being worn by police. And Kevin Walby's an associate criminal justice professor at the University of Winnipeg. He studied the use of body-worn cameras on police. When CBC's spoken to him in the past, he says studies in North America looking at the use of the cameras show mixed results. Mm-hmm. So he says there's very little proof use of force cases are significantly reduced. And in some cases, he actually told CBC that police felt emboldened by the presence of the cameras. I'm only raising this because I'm wondering how you, what you would say to that, but also how you would manage expectations for those that would see cameras as now we'll know, everything. Surely this will change the stats when there is some body of evidence to show that unfortunately, they don't always result in what the community might be hoping, and police maybe, which is safer streets.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it's the magic bullet, the silver bullet, or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's another tool. And I understand that the video wouldn't be immediately accessible to the public, but I think it would help with the investigation and further down the road, maybe released to the public to explain how things progressed and what happened. We need to get to another point where we have another level of understanding of what's going on in the streets and what's going on in these kind of interactions. Are we misguided? Do we not, when we're not seeing the full picture? Like I say, it's just another tool, but I think it's an absolutely necessary tool, especially at this time. I think it's long overdue for Winnipeg Police to have them. I don't understand how the Winnipeg Police Board haven't implemented them earlier. They should be held accountable because it's not just the Winnipeg Police that are making decisions. It's the police board, and the board are accountable to the public, and they need to get on board and also find and hire the next police chief that will adhere to that, and more importantly, knows about the community that is most impacted, and that's the Indigenous people and racialized people. And I would hope that they will find the next police chief that is, understanding of all of the importance of all of that.
How have police shootings in 2024, including this most recent one, how have they impacted the community as a whole through your lens?
It's definitely not helping in building that relationships. And someone pointed out that one of the police cars say building relationships on their cars, and this is not helping. And over a dozen so far this year. I mean, I can't remember the stats going back, but that seems like a lot. And I think that we can do better as a society. And I think we're hearing more about some of the other reasons and some of the other resources that should be at play, including responses to mental health and other social issues like that. But yeah, I believe it is another tool that could help tell that bigger story.
And just last, obviously, we're talking about cameras being part of the picture in your view, at any cost, because the police board, when we interview them, is going to say they cost this much, they don't show to be working in these cases. They may bring stats forward. I shouldn't guess what they'll say, but they will likely talk about the cost of these cameras. What would you say to that?
Definitely a factor, but it shouldn't be an excuse and a reason not to get them. This is where then we pull back even further and bring in the governments, all three levels of governments, to be held accountable as well on their serious support and will to build this relationship. It's critical, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And I think that we need to keep looking for ways while we're building relationships to give us tools to tell that bigger story.
Thank you very much for coming in with your perspective today.
Thank you, Ekase.
I just want to add something to that conversation. We did, CBC, reach out to the police board here in Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Police Board. And the councillor who is chair of the board, Marcus Chambers, said that the board does plan to monitor the rollout of body cameras with the RCMP, because that just started. You might know in Steinbach, some RCMP officers are wearing cameras now. So they're going to monitor that project before committing to anything, they have told us, with the Winnipeg Police. Well, as I like to say, this is Manitoba tries to make sense of things. And wow, how do you make sense of this? It changed so fast. Talking about the tariffs, the president-elect in the States, Donald Trump. Remember, he said 10% tariffs on goods coming from Canada into the States. Well, now he is saying 25%. You can imagine that this has sparked a lot of reaction, discussion, and concern, including from businesses here in our province. So Chuck Davidson, President and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, weighs in.
Good morning, Marcy.
What's the biggest worry from Manitoba?
Well, the biggest worry is the potential impact this is going to have. There's no question. When your biggest trading partner, when we do on an annual basis, 77% or close to of Canadian exports are going to the U.S. For Manitoba, it's about 73%. So you're talking about $15 billion annually in exports to the U.S. So when your biggest trading partner says, we want to increase that tariff, we were concerned when the discussion was about 10%. 25% is even more of a concern for us in terms of what that's going to look like and what kind of impact is that going to have on prices, supply chain, job losses, investor confidence. What kind of impact is that going to have on Manitoba businesses? That's a big concern. And so our call is we need to make sure this is the number one concern of both our provincial and federal government to do whatever possible to lessen the impact of this.
Obviously, we have a lot of analysis of this on throughout the morning, and some are saying Trump sometimes does things for a response, or maybe he's, using this as a starting point for negotiation. But what's your sense of this, and what's at stake if we don't lean in and take this seriously?
Well, I think that what's at stake is significantly to the Canadian economy. I mean, the Canadian Chamber had done a report on this and looked at the case of a 10% tariff would cost the Canadian economy $30 billion, and that's billion with a B. That was at 10%. Look at a 25% and extrapolate how much larger that would be. So this is going to have a significant impact on the Canadian economy if this goes forward. And so what are the elements that the Canada government could do? Well, obviously you would expect if someone's going to put a tariff on you, you're probably going to do likewise on them. So, and again, it's a no-win situation for either. And again, and this is something that's concerning in terms of what that relationship is looking like. So we need to make sure that we're focused on what's going to be in the best interest of Manitoba and Canadian companies.
Which sectors will be impacted the most? And I just want to read something for the listeners here, because November 6th, Manitoba's Premier Rob Canoe was talking about continuing to push the benefits of trade with the U.S. And he was highlighting to make the case that U.S. benefits from Manitoba goods and its critical minerals, just as an example, that have a lot to offer the American defense sector. That was from our reporting of what the Premier said then. What sectors are you thinking might be most concerned this morning?
Again, it's going to be critical minerals, it's going to be manufacturing, it's going to be ag products, it's going to be energy. All of these things are interconnected between Canada and the U.S. So all of these industries would be ones that you'd have to look in terms of what that impact looks like, whether it's bus manufacturing, aerospace. All of those are companies that have an office in Canada or the U.S. and are doing cross-border on a daily basis. What's the impact of that going to look like? And that's a big concern. We had concerns with sort of a Buy America mentality that was happening in the last number of years. This would take it to another level that we don't think is beneficial for again, either country in terms of that direction. So, which is why we've been saying this needs to be a top priority for both levels of government.
The Premier also pointed out, and this was at that early November press conference, Gary Dewar being an asset in his view, and that was because he was being announced. So the former Premier and ambassador to the U.S. Has been now appointed trade advisor here in Manitoba to this government. In your view, is that what could the impact of that be?
Well, I think it's absolutely crucial that you have boots on the ground in Washington. This is something that we've been calling for, and a lot of other provinces already have this, is to have an office set up in Washington to make sure that you're having regular conversations in regard to this. Having Gary Dewar is a bit of a blessing for Manitoba, the fact that he was the former ambassador to the U.S. and has a good knowledge base. But this needs to be a consistent thing that we do, not just in times of trouble, but also in times when things are good as well, because it's not necessarily just a relationship that you need to have with the president's office. It's one with state senators, it's with Congress people. It needs to understand that, Manitoba and a number of states are number one trading partners with each other. So this isn't just and so that's where some of the pressure and some of the negotiations need to take place, is with the individual states as well that are also beneficial to that relationship with Canada. We're their number one trading partner for many states in the U.S. They need to understand the impact this would potentially have on them as well.
Can you give us an example of a state when you're talking about that?
Yeah, so one of the key states is states like Minnesota, Ohio, Tennessee, as well as Georgia. These are key states from a trading perspective. The back and forth between Manitoba and those states is significant. on an annual basis, Tennessee is one of the biggest trading partners with Manitoba, specifically in regards to pharmaceutical products that are going into that state as well. So these are relationships that have been long-standing, that have been significant in terms of trade going both ways. These are things that we don't want to necessarily negatively impact by rhetoric or by not having that strong relationship that we know is important to both countries.
You used the word rhetoric. I think there may be some people that are thinking it's just rhetoric. It's just bluster. What if we just ignored this? Obviously, that's a wide sweeping, really, extreme point of view. But there are some that are saying, you do have to judge how seriously to take this, and also how much of this is rhetoric.
Well, I think that has to be taken into consideration, but I would not take it and just assume that it's rhetoric. I would take it seriously when your number one trading partner, who also recognizes that you're also their number one trading partner, is providing that sort of commentary. You need to take it seriously. I think it speaks to that level of that relationship that needs to happen as well, and making sure that both partners are doing things from a perspective that is going to benefit both. I think is important, and specifically before we get into negotiations on renegotiating CUSMA as well. So we know the challenges that we had with that with the first Trump administration in terms of the messaging that was being sent. I think we do need to take this seriously and recognize the importance of that relationship, which again is why we would strongly suggest both the federal and provincial governments need to step up their game and make sure that we're having that conversation.
We'll leave it there, Chuck. Thank you very much for your time on CBC.
Always a pleasure, Marcy.
Hi, my name is Morella Aiello, and I'm from Winnipeg, and this is Manitoba.
Well, next in the podcast, I'm going to invite my buddies, Corey Funk. Hey, neighbor.
Hi.
And Abby Adiyemi. Hey, neighbor.
Hey, neighbor.
We're waving at each other here through the glass here in our CBC studios. The three of us, of course, work on the morning show together. I'm calling you guys neighbors because the next thing coming up is going to be a Winnipeg woman that talks to us about why she thinks she has the best neighbor ever. But I think, Abby, you're going to say, maybe you do. What happened when people tried to steal your motorcycle?
Saturday morning, 11 a.m. You're going to be thinking the story happened late in the evening, but this happened like 11 a.m. People are like out and about, and I was like having my tea in the living room, took like a 5-minute break just to go use the washroom, and a few seconds later, the buzzer just goes crazy. I'm like, what's going on? I only just got up like a few seconds, and I just had to like, okay, come back, hit the talk back. Who's there? It's my neighbor upstairs. And she's this like senior in her golden years. And she goes, are you home? And I'm like, yeah. Did you put your bike on the road? Are you expecting someone to pick up your bike for repairs later? I'm like, no, the motorcycle is good. I'm looking. And then I said, no, it's not where it is. And she said, it's in the middle of the road. And I had to like just dash out with my jammies, and there is my motorcycle in the middle of the road. Cars are just scooting around it.
So in the time that you were sitting in your living room having your tea, you're looking at your bike, you go to the bathroom or whatever, and then you come back and people had tried to steal your bike. Why didn't it happen?
I don't know. And then I just walked out, and Miriam goes, oh, you know what? I noticed that it fell at some point, and I saw this black truck, and I thought maybe you have some repair people to come move it for you. And when I noticed they were dragging it, I said, no, this is wrong. And she had to go outside and made a whole bunch of noise and was really yelling at the top of her voice, because I saw all of this on the CCTV playback. She was like really screaming at them, and they had no choice but to drop the bike and just zoom off.
So she is the reason that your bike didn't get stolen.
She's got the badge. She's got the award from me as the best neighbor, I tell you.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Well, when we started this conversation, I mean, people went crazy with this. People love this, right? We love talking about our neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
We remember the ones when we were little that we lived beside. And sometimes, they end up being important, integral parts of our life. Corey, share some of the stories that folks have been writing to us about.
Yeah, here's a few. So Bettina Roberts wrote in. She says, when I lived in Brandon, she wants to shout out the Edwards sisters, Pam and Charlotte, on 3rd Street in particular. They were this safe house for her kids, she says. And if there was a snowball fight, they were totally into it. They Christmas caroled together. They had Halloween fun. And she even said when she was diagnosed with cancer, Nurse Charlotte helped diagnose her shingles. as well. So just the loveliest people on the street. She misses those.
Handy to
days.
live by a nurse.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Also heard from Allison Norberg. We had a wonderful neighbor, she says, growing up, Tina and Gordon Henwood. He was a retired neighbor. She made great cookies, and they loved having 6 kids next door. So we visited them lots. They hired my brothers to shovel snow. At the end of each school year, they trooped over with our report cards for a tea party. And after our report cards were reviewed, packets of money were passed around with each name beautifully written by Mrs. Henwood. And they wanted to have a treat of our choosing to celebrate our hard work. Neighbors that give money, that's a nice touch as well.
And safety, too. I'm going to shout out Dave here. We had a home invasion at our place, and then there was Dave knocking on the door. He's like, you guys don't know this, but I've got cameras everywhere. And he caught a whole bunch of stuff. He was really integral in the investigation. So
Huge.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. And finally here, Janessa Naylor Giesbrecht. Growing up in Winnipeg, with all our extended family out of province, our neighbors across the street became our chosen aunt and uncle. They were at our holiday parties. We slept over and played with their dog all the time, and they helped my parents get shoveled out of the house. And off to the hospital. I was born in the blizzard of 1987, and they were wonderful neighbors and longtime family friends. My Uncle Kevin passed just over a year ago, and those good memories all came flooding back.
So there's a high bar for best neighbor ever, and keep the stories coming, by the way. If you want to write to us on Facebook page, Marcy Marcusa on Facebook, just please do. But let's get to this story with the Winnipegger, who still claims, even despite hearing all of this, that she has the best neighbor ever. She lives in Old Tuxedo in Winnipeg. Her name is Claudia Corona, and she's actually been in a heated competition with her neighbor for like 20 years about who is the best. They try to outdo each other with kindness. And there was a wedding a few months ago, Dan's wedding, and Dan asked her to speak at the wedding, and she gave a speech. It was all about what it was like to be neighbors with Dan. BNE.
BNE.
What does
Not
that
the
mean?
bee's knees and not the B Andy.
What does it mean?
But the best neighbor ever.
The BNE, Dan.
I won the lottery. I absolutely have the best neighbor ever.
So how did this competition begin? What is this, 20 years?
It's 20 years, and I think that the concept of Dan's my chosen family, and it happened in very small moments over time. And so it's not grand gestures, it's small gestures and chosen family, because when you look at your neighbor like that and care about, I think it's about caring about them. And we've been through it over 20 years, and it just developed into this, moment where he asked me to speak. I was the only non-family member at that wedding, a very small, intimate wedding. And for a year, I was absolutely skipping. I had to skip in my step because he chose me. And it really validated that all the things we've been through as neighbors has created this. I mean, we may not be neighbors because his house is for sale. I'm still hoping no one will buy it. We may have to follow him so we can be best neighbors ever, forever. Yeah, it's just, I think that when life gets so difficult, I think it's important that we take care of each other, especially when the ones we live so close to.
I love that. I love how you put all of that. Did you share some of that in the speech? What did you share in your speech?
I sure did. When I said I won the lottery, it's gifts, so thoughtful gifts, like a vintage red bicycle built for two for our 10th wedding anniversary, which we've been riding for 10 years, and it was with a big bow in the yard. It's just been all the milestones. We are so blessed with gifts, and I don't know if you remember when there was an app where you
Take your time. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It was about works of arts in art galleries.
Okay.
And one looked like my daughter. And then, he works in the estate field, and he found one and brought it home. And now we have it in our house.
Wow.
I mean, just so thoughtful, and also funny things, like really funny, weird bumper stickers. We may have started that one.
What are some of these? Are they radio clean? What are some of these bumper
Maybe
stickers?
not. So I won't even go there. And this Halloween, a sort of scary doll in the tree facing our yard, which who knows what we're going to turn it into next for the Christmas holidays. We may change it into an angel, but.
So did this start with you guys meeting in the yard? Do you even remember, or sitting out there? Is it the shared moments, or you know what I mean? They build up over the years.
His sister lived in the house before, and he bought it from her, and so she was also best neighbor ever.
Yeah.
But we've had more time with him, or I've had more time with him. So,
What memories stick out for you? Obviously, you've mentioned a few of them, but I don't want to cut you off if you have other stories you really want to share.
there's a few things like snow blow. I call him snow blower, lawn mower, clover grower, furnace ranger, tire changer, garage rearranger. So I think some of those things, it's sort of like classic, or what I think neighbors events should be. So
What did it mean to you to be able to dub Dan best neighbor ever, and even today to be able to tell Manitoba about Dan?
Oh, I'm a little bit beside myself because what came out. I worked really hard on that speech. I'm not a public speaker, as you can tell, and I didn't want to let him down because he chose me, and he is the best neighbor ever. He's the best friend ever. He's my chosen family, and so this is an absolute thrill that this came out of a love sort of speech.
There's traditions you guys actually have as well, right? So what are some of the traditions you have?
Well, he's also one of those lines was the Christmas gift stasher, because he would stash Santa Claus gifts and then come over and help us, and him and his now wife Desiree. They built the Barbie dream house, and I mean, they took the decals out, they opened it up, they set it up like Barbie had been living there for 10 years. And so right down to hiding gifts and celebrating Christmas Eves for years with us and our family and all the milestones.
Love that. What are the qualities that make someone a good neighbor? People are writing in about their neighbors.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my! I've been listening all morning. Chosen family. Like, how do you want to treat people that you love the most, and caring for them, and it could be the littlest thing that makes the biggest difference for someone.
We're going to share more stories. And if people were watching YouTube, they would have seen your letter and some of the special things you share with Dan. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And talking about your BNE.
Thank you. I love you, BNE. He couldn't be here because he's having dentist work. So
I love that you know
I'm
that.
even being a BNE right now.
All right, can't resist off that conversation. One more neighbor story to share. Sandy Buse Fraser wrote in, and this is actually not even her story. It's her Nan's neighbors, Bea and Lionel. Love the names. Bea and Lionel. So they lived across the back lane, she said, from each other for over 60 years. That is such a Winnipeg thing and such a Manitoba thing, right? Growing up, she says they were like an aunt and uncle to us kids. But here's my favorite. They shared a newspaper subscription. How old school is that, right? So in the early morning, her grandparents would get the paper and then they'd read it and they would walk it over at noon. And then this couple got the paper in the afternoon. I just kind of love that. Well, speaking of subscribing, or more correctly, following, we hope you do that. Follow and share. Find us where you get your podcasts. And we're new. So tell us what you like. Tell us what you'd like to hear as well. And we'll catch you the next time on This is Manitoba.